afternoon, good morning, good evening to all our listeners, and wishing all our women leaders a very, very happy International Women's Day. On this episode of the CX Chat Show, we have Lara Khouri amongst us. Lara has been a very, very successful individual following a very successful corporate career with blue-chipped UK headquartered multinationals. Lara, a people's person who gets process, began her mission to make our world a happier place. She founded There Is No Spoon, a boutique experience creation and change leadership training and consulting provider on the values of passion, positivity, and putting people first. Focusing on the big picture while always keeping an eye on how all the elements must come together. Lara's approach is built on giving people the knowledge and tools they need to achieve their goals. Lara, welcome to the CX Chat Show. It's absolute pleasure to having you on the latest edition of the CX Chat Show, and that too on International Women's Day. You have been a founding member of Women in CX, and it's an absolute pleasure and having you, Lara. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Sarfaraz. Thank you for the invitation. And on International Women's Day, which also, since you mentioned it, happens to be the first birthday of Women in CX. We launched on International Women's Day of last year. So happy birthday.
Hey, that's great to hear. I think it's just sheer coincidence.
Yes.
That's lovely to have you on the show. Lara, I did give a very quick brief about yourself and your journey, and I'm sure I have missed a couple of things about you. So would you enlighten our audience, a few things which I didn't touch upon? I'm sure our audience would love to hear from you.
Well, thank you very much. I suppose I'll share by pointing out something that people point out to me, which is when they check my LinkedIn profile, they see all these marketing titles everywhere and they get confused, like, how am I in CX, but my title has always been marketing. And the truth is, I've been doing CX for the last 20 years or so, even though my title was marketing. And that's what really propelled me forward. So once I started my consultancy at the end of 2018, beginning of 2019, I suddenly found myself in a situation, in a position where I was being asked to participate in so many initiatives that were marketing and CX related, 2020 aside, because that was a very quiet year for the world. And that's when I realized that I had finally really found my place doing something that I love doing with people that I love doing it with. And, a lot of it has happened. It seems like coincidence. So I have contributed to a book on experience leadership. It's called Punk Excel, and it's led by Adrian Swinscoe, who had previously written Punk CX. I've edited a book on customer centricity by a fellow Women in CX member, Elenia Vidili. I've edited chapters in the CX4 book as well. So just all of these initiatives that are happening that I'm really now so blessed and privileged and humbled to be a part of. So that's sort of the biggest thing, where people ask me, okay, but how did you go from marketing to CX? Just because of the way life happened, I guess.
I think you're destined to be in CX. Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that, and it's a pleasure to having you. Now, I've been, going through your profiles and the various presentations and all the keynotes that you have been doing. One thing which I have been noticing, Lara, is you have been very, very vocal about linking CX to value. So how do you see, or why do you think it is really that important, that critical in linking CX to value, Lara?
I'm so glad you asked this question, because for me, at least, it is an integral part of how I do what I do. And the reason it's so important is because people whether they're aware of it or not, um, whether they are super rich or they are middle class, whether they go to work every day or they stay at home and they take care of the house, whoever they are, whatever they are doing, people are guided by their values. So it's not just about what they value, as in they value their family or they value money. It is the underpinning reason of why. What is it about these things that you value that talks to who you are as a person? And it's those values. I like to call them values with a capital V. That's what drives us as people. So when you can link the experience that people are having to the values that they hold that drive them, number one, it makes for a much, much more relevant and appreciated experience on their side. And what that translates to is repeat business for your business. That's how we gain loyalty and brand ambassadorship, is by talking to those core values that people have.
I think that's a very, very important aspect that you touched upon, repeat business, loyalty. Now, these are few things which drives businesses. Now, every business, I'm sure, would understand retaining customers is the biggest challenge that they have. And of course, as you mentioned, it is the value that drives in that loyalty aspect. And at times we feel that it's the right questions or the right kind of experiences that we provide to our customers, or to even it could be our prospects. So why do you think that we need to ask the right questions to our customers or to our prospects, or even it could be even to our employees, because they are also integral part of any experience that an organization is driving through. So why do you see, we need to really position and ask the right questions, Lara?
Two reasons, two very big reasons. The first one is, and since you bring up employees, if we're not asking, or rather when we're not asking the right questions, we're not getting the information that we need in order to make the right decisions. And when it comes to customers, it's the same thing. If we're not asking the right questions, we're not getting the information we need that allows us to create that experience that will drive their loyalty and that repeat business. And there's a way to ask questions. So, for example, what questions are extremely powerful? When you're talking to, let's say, a colleague, and you ask, what do you enjoy about working here? What do you not enjoy about working here? What would make it more enjoyable for you? What is a very direct kind of question that allows us to really dig deep into those core reasons, that fundamental rationale for why people do what they do? And even though I've just said why, what we want to stay away from is actually asking why. Because when you ask someone why they feel a certain way or why they do a certain thing, that, even no matter how we position it, no matter how they will try to answer it, on some level, they feel that they must now justify their actions, their feelings. So, if you ask someone, why did you decide to do this? It's like, oh, are you telling me I was wrong? Should I have done something else? But when you ask someone, what was it that made you see that this is how things should be done? You go, oh, well, I saw this. Now you're getting facts. You're not getting emotional responses from people who have felt aggressed and are now defensive, or who feel that they have to justify something and are just being purely emotional. Emotion has a time and place, and we need to balance emotion with fact. So, for example, there's a company that I worked with many years ago, which used to be a charity. And eventually it got bought by a corporation. And when it got bought, a lot of staff members left. And the reason they left, as was eventually discovered, is because working for a profit-making corporate did not align with their values. They valued working with a charity. This was in the education sector. And they felt that education should not be a profit-making exercise. So they left. And can you imagine, like, when X amount of people leave, suddenly you have a pocket that needs to be filled. Otherwise, your business stops running. So as a corporation, going back to that important point that you made, yes, we must ask our staff what they value about working with us so that we know, even if we're going to make a decision that they might not like, at least we're prepared. If they walk out, we know what we need to do if it comes to that. When it comes to customers, it's important to understand what they value, because a lot of times when you think that you are over delivering on a promise, you are actually under delivering it from their perspective. So for example, I was traveling for Christmas with my family, and at the time we needed to do a PCR test, and different countries have their different, you must take the sample no later than 96 hours. The result must be no older than 48 hours. So you have to sit there, do a little bit of math to figure out, okay, when are you landing, right? How many hours difference is it between when you land and where you are? Therefore, what time can you get the sample taken? When do the results come out? So I sat with my family and we did all of this, and we called up a few labs, and there was one lab that we decided to go with because they're a drive-through. So we didn't want to have to get down and be in a place where people might have COVID and we might catch something. So we went to this drive-through. They had said that the results will come out between 12 and 24 hours. So we did the math. Yes, okay, perfect. We know what time we need to go to get these results. The results came out within 2 hours after our visit. And we didn't really think anything of it because we just thought, okay, well, we've told them that we need this for traveling. We've told them what the requirements are. So we've done our part. We showed up to check in and we were denied boarding because the gentleman looked at the timestamp of the sample and he said, this is expired. By the time you land, it'll be more than 48 hours. We cannot allow you to board. Now, can you imagine? So this lab thought that they were over-delivering on their promise of getting us the results, because the quicker the better. But by doing that, they actually put us in a very stressful, very frustrating, aggravating situation. I called them up. They couldn't help. There was nothing they could do. There was nowhere to get a PCR done on site. Eventually, the airport authorities in the country we were going to allowed us and some other people to board because there were other passengers facing that same problem. And all because the organization thought that by over-delivering, by getting us the results quicker, we would appreciate it. And they had totally misunderstood the value that we attached to the time frame that they had given us.
I mean, this is something I recently, with all the PCRs and the RT-PCRs around, a lot of us have gone through this, and I can totally relate it. And this is where, as you rightly pointed out, over-delivering the promise it didn't delight you, but then it put you in a really, really uncomfortable situation. So organizations definitely need to rethink, revisit on over-delivering or, delivering that is not being expected at all. So would that bring a smile, or is it going to put you in a difficult situation? I mean, that's a brilliant example. And I think a lot of us could relate to that. How do we decode these answers? Earlier, when you're talking to employees, when you're talking to customers, we ask questions of why, what, and how, when. So the answers that we get out of these questions is, absolutely, it could be ranging anything that we least expect. For an organization or from a consultant's perspective, how do you interpret these answers? How do we decode these answers to get the right kind of information, which would help us on our CX strategy formation, or going forward, what best suits for the organization? Lara, how do we do that?
Well, there's a couple of things to bear in mind when we're looking at decoding the answers. The first thing is, first of all, have we asked enough of the right questions? And, all of those what questions. What do you value about it? What does this mean to you? What does? And you keep going down. And eventually, what you will get to when you ask enough of those what questions is you will get people to start describing how they feel about something. So many times when I'm working with my clients, especially with the startups, they want to make sure that they are connecting. Startups, more than larger organizations, tend to have this idea of, I want to connect with people on an emotional level. Organizations that are multinational, especially the ones that have been around for a long, long time and have a certain sort of brand awareness in the market, they approach it slightly differently. Not that one is right and the other is wrong. It's just because of who you are, how big you are, how you operate, different approaches will work. And so with the startups, it becomes a case of, okay, we ask the what, the what, the what. Now, every startup, even me as a solopreneur, I have an internal culture. And when you were reading out, you said passion, positivity, and putting people first. Those are the values that I founded this on. And the way I got to that was by asking myself a lot of these what questions. And eventually I got to the point of, what do you value about putting people first? I value how it makes me feel. All right. How does it make me feel? It makes me feel calm and peaceful. And once you start getting to that point where you can understand how you want people to feel, it will help you decode the answers that you have been getting, because now you have sort of an end point that you want to reach. Also, we decode the answers by listening to what people have not said. So I was working with a client who needed to upskill some of their staff members on presenting the organization in a way that got people to feel a certain way about the value of what they were buying from this organization. And so one of the things that we did was we went through a list of the common objections that they get. And a lot of times it was really funny. People would tell them, this is a lot of money, I can't pay it all at once. I said, okay, well, what does that tell you about what these people are able and willing to do? And this was, we'd already been working together for a couple of days. And so one of the ladies just almost immediately went, they're not saying it's too expensive. They're saying they can't pay it all at once. So this is when we tell them about the payment plan that we have. And so this way, they as the organization could understand that people weren't telling them what you're selling is too expensive. They were telling them, I want what you're selling, make it easier for me to pay you. And so once they start putting that payment plan in place, people start going, oh, I don't have to pay at 30, 50, 100,000 dirham all at once. I can pay it in installments, 6 months, 3 months. They are open. The organization is open to having this conversation with me. They understand that I want to buy from them. They understand the importance of what they offer to me, and they want to make it easier for me to do business with them. So yeah, look at how it makes them feel, and look at what they don't say as much as what they do say.
I think interpreting these answers and decoding these answers is the key to formulate the right strategies, if I'm not mistaken. And a brilliant example of where you said, like, I can't pay at once, and it says it's not expensive. Hey, hold on, I like what I'm paying for, but it's just that I can't pay at once. And you just come out with a different payment policy, payment terms, and then that's a different strategy that altogether that drives in. What happens after this? What happens? We decode the answers, we find what is it, what happens, what's the next step that organizations get into, Lara? Just curious over there.
It's pretty much, well, I was going to say it's pretty much business as usual. It might not be business as usual. It might be that the organizations now have to look at a way of measuring success differently. So, before you start, and this isn't just with CX, this is with anything, right? Before you launch a new product, you do a little test first, make sure that it's working well. You do your focus groups, you have some early adopters that you will give your product to, the loyal customers, all of that. It's the same thing with CX initiatives, right? You decide, how are you going to measure success? What does success mean to you as an organization? All right, how are you going to measure it? Okay, and then you reverse engineer the whole thing. So by the time you've now gotten to the point where you've asked all the questions, you've gotten all the answers, you've now put your strategy and your implementation plan in place, the next step is pilot it, see how it does, because you've already measured, well, not measured, you've already got your success measures in place. You know what you're measuring for, and you see, okay, how is this working? Right. Is it working well? Yes, it's working well. Great. Let's spread out a bit more. Let's spread out a bit more. This is a lot of times why restaurants, for instance, they do soft openings before they launch to the wider public, because they want to get from a small group of trusted sources the honest truth about, are we meeting your expectations? You know, we have said, we promised you an ambiance of XYZ. Are you getting that from the furniture, the food, the music, the way the waiters and waitresses are behaving with you? If yes, and you're consistently coming back, great. We know that we've got the winning formula for our target market. We're now going to open to the general public. If not, you go back. So there's always going to be, you know, you launch something, you pilot it, you change it, okay, you adapt it. And this goes on. This is an ongoing thing because times change, people change. 2020 proved that more than anything else, right? You have to always be ready to change. And if there are any organizations out there that have ridden through 2020 and are thinking, okay, well, we're going to go back to normal as it was before 2020, chances are they're going to find that business isn't as good as it was before the pandemic. Chances are that they're going to find that it's more difficult for them to do business, because what 2020 did, along with a lot of other things, is it gave us as individuals the chance to really think, what do I care about? What's important to me? It's like, okay, let's say you live in a big city. You have a 2-hour commute twice a day. So that's 4 hours that you are spending commuting to and from work. The reason you're doing this is to make X amount of money. The reason you're doing that is because you have bills to pay, you have family to support, all of that. Okay. What 2020 did was it allowed people to think, okay, I value my family. I'm working in order to provide for them. But this 4-hour commute, especially now that I know and that my company knows that I can do this virtually, that I don't have to be in the office every single day, I want more of this. And now we have this great resignation, which apparently it's still going on. There are different parts of the world that are going through their own great resignations, because there are parts of the world that have now said, okay, everybody back to the office. No, don't want to, can't make me, I'm going to find another job. Right. So this is still a lot of learning. And what organizations, I feel very strongly that organizations are in a beautiful space right now because people sympathize with them. This doesn't usually happen where people sympathize with big companies, with multinationals. People tend to think, oh, you've got enough money, you've got enough stuff, you can, you do your own thing. You don't care about us, so we don't care about you. But now people are looking at organizations of different sizes and they're sympathizing with them. In many cases, they empathize with them. So this is a beautiful opportunity for organizations to put their hands up and say, you know what? We weren't doing things the best way that we could have. Here's what we're going to try. And if, as an organization, you get something wrong, it's okay to say, you know what? We didn't get it exactly right, but we're going to keep trying. And people will respond to that.
I think I like that the last bit very much. We didn't get it right, but we're not going to stop there. We keep trying. We keep trying to become better in what we are doing. I think that's something almost every other organization needs to really look into it when it comes to their CX strategies. We haven't got it right. We have been probably horrible in the past, but hey, we are looking at it. We try again and again until and unless we bring in that a small smile when you have to use a service, use our products, or anything of ours from an organization's perspective. I think that is the fundamental about bringing a wow experience. It was absolute brilliant having you on the CX Chat Show, Lara. One last thing. This is
Yes.
something which I already had in my mind even before this. Why did you name your company or your boutique consultant as a consulting firm? There is no spoon. Just a curious one.
I love this question. I love this question because I feel that it will really show everything that we've now spoken about today is really how I live what I do. So do you remember a movie that came out something like 20 years ago called The Matrix? Small movie.
I do.
You may have seen it.
Yeah.
So in that first Matrix movie, there's at one point, Neo, the main character, is waiting to see the Oracle. And in the waiting room, there's a little boy, shaved head, looks like the little boy from Avatar. And he's got a spoon in his hand and he's bending the spoon. And so Neo, who thinks that because he is the one who's there to save humanity, save mankind from the machines, figures to himself, well, I should be able to bend the spoon. So he asks for the spoon, takes the spoon, and then the spoon doesn't bend. And so the little boy looks at him and very calmly says, you cannot bend the spoon. That is impossible. Instead, you have to realize the truth. And Neo says, what truth? And the little boy says, there is no spoon. It is you that bends. And so when I made this decision consciously, very consciously, that when I'm going to work with clients, whether they're startups or multinationals, I need for them to understand from the very beginning that we are going to take a very long, hard, deep look at how they do what they do. Because when they come to me and they say, well, we want our customers to behave in a certain way. Okay, well, that's the spoon. You can't bend it. You cannot force people to behave a certain way. What you can do is change how you present yourself to them, how you provide your products or services to them, and they will respond to that change. And that's how you get people to behave in a certain way, whether that is loyalty, brand ambassadorship, whatever it might be that you want from them, is by changing yourself, not by forcing them, because that can't happen. Well, very rarely can that happen. And if you do force people to do something, Safar, as you know as well as I do, we as human beings, we don't appreciate it. And there are a lot of times where we will, well, I have to do it, I don't want to do it. That doesn't create a lot of good feelings and good energy between the customers or the employees and the organization.
Perfect. I think that's a beautiful, beautiful story behind the name. Once again, thank you so much, Lara. It was absolute pleasure to have you today amongst us on this edition of the CX Chat Show. Once again, wishing you a very, very happy International Women's Day. And I look forward to have more such conversations with you.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me, Sarfraz. It was such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lara.